And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for finding some time for joining us tonight. So tonight's topic is top tips on how to tackle a coding challenge. So again, thank you so much for finding some time this evening to, to join our live discussion. Please make sure to introduce yourselves in the comments. Let us know what you do. And join our conversations with your comments and questions. So if you're new to my live show, I'm Jana Martins, and I've recently started my journey as IT recruiter. Hence, I've started this new YouTube channel dedicated to IT career in Australia. So tonight, we're going to talk about top tips on how to tackle a coding challenge. And Michael is going to share his valuable tips and when it comes to solving coding challenges. And we're also going to talk through a few points like, are the coding challenge still relevant, in 2021? Why coding challenges might have like a bad name, and, maybe how to stand out if you know that you're bad at coding challenges. So we're going to cover those kind of questions as well as giving you some practical tips on solving some coding challenges. So obviously it's an incredibly relevant topic, especially for those who are looking for a job at the moment. Please make sure tag or share this video with those who need to hear this. And before I pass it on to Michael to introduce himself, I just want to quickly remind you, we're going live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So if you want to watch replays, just make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, IT Career in Australia. I'm going live there every Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. Melbourne time, with various experts from my industry. And we're talking about all the things about, job search, career, and specifics of IT industry in Australia. So you can also join my meetup group if you want to get some notification about upcoming events. And please make sure to join our conversation, ask as many questions as you want, but please also make sure you stay on the topic. So the topic, obviously, coding challenge today. And as I said, make sure to introduce yourself in the comments. It's really nice to, see who's here. And please share also with us if you may be looking for the job at the moment and maybe doing some coding challenge at the moment. So that's enough of me. Passing on to Michael to introduce himself. Please, Michael.
Hi, Jana. Thank you. Thank you for having me on this great show. And good evening to everyone. As you said, I am Michael Milewski. I'm also in Melbourne, Australia. I've been a developer since 2000. I have worked in various companies, from the telcos here to the real estate companies here, as well as most recently in a number of startups. And I kind of feel, I suppose, in a lot of those that I have had the opportunity to both assess people in coding challenges, to take coding challenges myself for various kind of roles to try and get jobs, sometimes succeed, sometimes not. So I suppose I've kind of talked to a lot of people recently who have either been going for a particular job where they want particular skills in a coding challenge, or juniors just trying to get in for the first job, or trying to work out why they're not succeeding in coding challenges or why they're finding them difficult. And I've kind of been sharing tips with people in various forms. So I thought it would be a great opportunity here to share them with Jana on her channel and all those listening. So yes, I also encourage any questions. Feel free to throw them this way, and we'll see how we can address them.
Thank you, Michael. I'm gonna learn a lot today as well. So obviously, I've never done any coding challenge in my life, but been definitely seen a few and have been sending some to some of the applicants. So would love to obviously pick your brain today as well. David saying hello. Thank you, David. So guys, please, as I said, introduce yourself in the comments, and we would love to know if you actually been doing some coding challenges recently. Maybe, you already have some questions about those coding challenges. Please make sure to put it in the comments, and we'll definitely get back to your questions shortly. But Michael, okay, before I guess we're going to some practical tips, let's have a broader look at the topic. And this kind of burning questions: are coding challenges still relevant? Do we still need to do them? Like, everyone just so tired of coding challenges. So, what do you think? Do we need still those coding challenges for the hiring process?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting topic, and I mean, it's one that brings up a lot of pressure for some people, because you are put on the spot. For a lot of people, it would be considered not a standard thing you'd have to do in a job. Like, in a job, we're expected that we already know people. We are expected that we can work things out. Then there's no kind of time pressure, or do this on the weekend, or do this in an hour kind of thing, which a coding challenge typically is. And I suppose one thing that kind of often comes up is, well, how do these coding challenges compare to other industries, right? So if you're a lawyer, would you expect to have a weekend challenge to come up with a law defense on something? Or if you're a doctor, are we going to just take you over and say, operate on this patient, show us that you can do certain things in a convoluted environment? Because you're not kind of asking that person to come and join us or show us what you've done before. You're actually asking them to perform that particular task. And obviously, because it's broken down into a small, something you can do in a timely fashion, it's often what would be considered a toy problem. I suppose you could also argue on the other side to say, well, it's, maybe as a developer, you're more like somebody who can do woodwork, or somebody who can, build a house. At which stage you may say, well, show us other work you've done. Or if I expect you to work as a cabinet maker, can you come on the shop floor and make a cabinet? And if it's reasonable that a door of a cabinet can be made within an hour, why wouldn't I want to see how well you work with tools? And I think that's kind of where coding falls, where it's somewhere in the middle. It's a very much a practical task that you can actually do something in a short period of time. But often we want to hire for somebody more than just somebody who can solve a toy problem. So I think what's happened is we've kind of fallen into this position where it's still a good test of seeing whether somebody's at a particular level and competency, and we can still do it, even if we don't necessarily, even if we don't like it, or if it's not something you do day to day in that job. And I mean, that's kind of just talking about whether we still want to be doing that kind of thing. And I think, and some of the things hopefully we'll talk about is coding challenges beyond just getting a job. But I think the other thing that's often missed in this, when people are doing coding challenges and they're saying, well, come on, we expect that you can write all of this code, they may not understand that, well, at the same time, I may be at home trying to homeschool some kids. I have 4 kids. I am trying to homeschool with my wife 4 kids. On the weekend, you may be saying, well, certainly you've got time to read this problem and do this coding challenge. But again, maybe I have a sick mother that I need to look out for, or spend more time with my wife and kids and things like that. And it kind of skews it a lot against people with these other things that keep them busy, whether it's sports, whether it's family, whether it's kids, whether it's their own health problems, whether it's their social, things that they want to take part on. And these things kind of take away to say, well, maybe I don't have as much time as somebody else does to spend on this coding challenge. And I think what often happens is you do see certain styles of workplaces and certain types of coding challenges. And then if you look under the covers in that company, you'll actually see a set mold of the kind of people they hire, which may be what they want, but you have to be very cautious that if you have stipulated quite a strict or time limited or extremely high kind of high caliber coding challenge, you may actually not be getting the diversity that you want in your team. You'll just be kind of creating this monoculture of saying, right, we've got all these people that can solve this particular problem really quickly, but none of them can maybe connect with the customer, can understand the business need, etc. So as you've kind of mentioned, are they relevant? Have they got a bad name? I think we have to come into these as both people that are looking for jobs or hiring in quite a. I think we have to come in, really delving into why these approaches are what we want to do and how they're affecting the kind of people we're hiring. And it still may mean you choose to run a coding challenge, but maybe you may decide to mark people differently. Certainly, and I have seen this where you have people that get hired that really struggle to write some code. And you kind of go, well, if they're not really helping the team in other ways, then maybe they need to have some more time practicing. Some of these things should be second nature. So as I mentioned, there's various kind of pressures that this causes. It potentially means you hire a particular group of kind of people. I still think they are relevant. At the moment, I think a lot of people are also choosing not to do coding challenges because it's quite a hot market, especially in Australia. There's a lot of people trying to get jobs, and asking somebody to spend a weekend writing a code challenge is something that may lose. You may lose an applicant who may go somewhere else, and they've just said, right, you've worked in software in 5 companies over 5 to 10 years. We think you're good enough. You probably can do it.
And I guess Michael, you mentioned quite a few valid points here. I like your example of comparing with other industries, because that's true. Some of our other industries actually do have trials as well, and in hospitality, everyone go and spend one day in the restaurant before get hired. It's quite a common practice. Or salespeople need to do sales presentation, or designers need to show the some of the design. But look, I'm glad you also mentioned about how much time you need to spend on the coding challenge, because there's so many constraints, and we are all busy. I actually we did run some quiz last week and ask people on LinkedIn how much time they prepared to invest into take home coding challenge. And I guess, as you can see from our results, it's kind of split it. It feels like majority of people would spend less than 2 hours to find it reasonable, but there's quite still a few who happy to invest more than 4 hours. So no one want to do 3-4 hours. It's probably the wrong spot. You either spend a lot of time solving this problem, or you want to do it really quick. So that seems like the most the common answer. And guys, whoever is listening to us right now, I'm actually curious to know as well, how much time would you invest to the coding challenge? Just want to obviously say hi to everyone who's joining us. Hi Ryan, hi Naresh. So we already have a few questions, Michael. We just started, and some questions already coming out our way. But I guess before we take the question, what is your opinion? You mentioned you have 4 kids, 2 dogs. Life is hectic at the moment. Would you spend any time doing coding challenge?
Yes, I suppose. I mean, let's understand what kind of coding challenges there are. The ones I've come across are, you can do an online quiz, right? So they'll send you a link, and you got literally 30 minutes to try and answer some number of questions. You don't know whether it's how quickly you answer them, whether you answer them right or wrong. One recently that I've actually come across is where one of the recruiters threw up a slideshow and said, hey, are you ready for some technical questions? I said, sure. And from the slideshow, he literally showed me various bits of code, and I had to guess or educated work out what that code does, which really puts you on the spot. And he wasn't even a coder, so he would obviously have known these questions and knew the things I had to answer to get them right. So that's kind of very quick, and it's I suppose a filter to say, well, if you can't answer these questions, we don't want to talk to you, which is kind of rough. And they were hard questions. I did pass that step. And then you've got, the typical one that I've always kind of imagined as being most typical is where somebody gives you a coding problem, and it's, they've given you an idea of what you need to do and how you solve it. And they've said, look, don't spend any more than 4 hours on this. Go and do it over the weekend. And I think looking at your poll, I think traditionally developers are really bad at estimating time. So I actually did put 3 to 4 hours because my preference is 1 hour. I'd rather just do something that can be done in 1 hour. But I know that if I'm doing it at home, I'll actually come back to it and try and revisit it and try and make it a little bit better. So certainly that kind of traditional take it home, I think a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I only spent 4 hours on this, when they actually spent many, many more hours on this. And that kind of makes it a little bit unfair. And I think more recently, and certainly, people have said, well, actually, I don't know who solved that code challenge. So unless you can code with us and we do a pair programming session or something like that, that's the only real way we'll know. And it's kind of interesting because when you're set the session to, so here are the things, right? We can do an online test, take-home test, or an in-person live coding. And I feel that the live coding has become a lot more popular recently. One, because both parties are putting in some time. So obviously you'll know that at that point that company is also putting more time in rather than just sending you a coding test. But again, it's a really tough one, and I see some questions there about how do you kind of tackle these coding challenges. To put you down in the spot in 1 hour and just expect to solve problems is really tough. And I mean, I enjoy it. I'm reasonably competent at it. I'm not like extremely good at it, but certainly I could imagine that's not what I do most of the time as a developer. Two, I know a lot of people that I've worked with that I'd rate as really great developers that would struggle in that scenario. So certainly I do kind of wonder how good that is as an option. But yeah, so there's all of these various kinds of coding challenges that you can have out there. At which stage, I've actually forgotten, what was the original question, Jana?
My original question was how much time you would spend yourself. Right. So, and I guess we get to, you already answered this question. So you kind of, you think you're going to spend less than an hour, but it's ended up being 3-4 hours anyway.
Yeah. So as I said, I mean, it's weird because my preference is they will short 1 hour in person live coding. But I feel that often the people doing these tests are not very understanding of the other person. So it's not so much the candidate, it's more the actual employer. These people are usually engineers. They're not experts at dealing with people in stressful situations. And sometimes they're not interested or don't know how to make that person feel at home. Often they call them pairing interviews. I would call them more staring interviews because it's like pairing is where two people do something together. Like it's a conversation. It's like, yep. Hey, I'll stop you from going the wrong direction, or I'll help you with this. But often in these pairing interviews, they just stare at you and say, well, what are you going to do next? And you kind of go, I'll try this, and I think I'll do this. So yeah, they're very tough, and as I said, I kind of feel that they would be fair if the people actually running them were fair to say, right, this person may have not prepared for an algorithmic challenge. Is that important to us? And if it's not, well, what else can happen? There is one other challenge, which I haven't seen very often, but one other challenge is that people actually send you a piece of their code base. And this is interesting because this is not a toy problem at that point. It's an actual snippet of the code base from production. And I have had one of these. And I'll tell you that as much as it's kind of good because you see how that company works, you see how they put their tests together, how they write their code. There's no rush to try and do anything because you're basically given, this is our code base, we're trying to achieve this goal. But it's also extremely difficult because you have to try and understand what that company does. So certainly if you were in an e-commerce company and you went to another e-commerce company and they said, hey, we've got this e-commerce problem, how are you going to solve it? That might be good. But if you're working in a banking sector and you want to move to the electricity sector and they say, this is a problem we have with charging electric vehicles, you may go, oh, I've got to learn what charging electric vehicles is like and maybe some of the underlying business logic there, which ultimately, as an engineer, is what we kind of really want to hire people for. But yes, that is another challenge that as much as it is good, it is extremely difficult because you have to try and pick up the business logic and wade through a lot more code often.
Yeah, so it's definitely go like above just the coding challenge. So Michael, we have a lot of questions coming up in the comments. I guess let's try to tackle let's try to tackle not only coding challenges but the questions today as well. So the first question from Ashraf. So I'm a junior software developer and I'm currently looking for full-time work. I often find coding challenges very difficult to complete in a given time. I would like to know how to prepare for such challenges. And I guess, Michael, you have like your, top tips how to, get through the coding challenge. So would you like to share it with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to assume, there was a time thing there. So I don't know if this is, but I suppose we can do both. So one is an in-person challenge and the other one is a take-home challenge. Let's start with the take-home challenge because I actually, that's kind of my preference in general. The reason with the take-home being a preference is you get, as much as I'd hate to write software this way, you actually get a brief. You get a document that says, some kind of problem statement with an example. So let's imagine okay, we've got a chat room here. So let's imagine it's a feed of comments coming in. And these comments are, in some kind of format, but somebody has had to write the actual problem statement. So they may write something like, given a comment stream on Jana's YouTube channel, each comment has a time, a user, and a piece of text. Tell me, ultimately, write a program that will tell me how many comments per user and how many comments per time period may be there. So you'll have something like this, so you can refer to this. And what I often see is people jump at what they think everything meant and try and just write some code. And they just try and write some code that kind of generally works. And usually this is also this problem statement is followed with write production quality code, just solve the problem and use tests, right? So test-driven is, I think, generally the norm, at least in these coding challenges. I think various companies do testing in various ways. But I think what usually happens at that point, and especially for a lot of juniors, they go, oh my God, I think I can work this out. And they just jump into whatever their favorite editor is and whatever their favorite language is and just try and hack it out, which is great, right? Because by doing that, you're starting to understand the question. And obviously, one of the tips is make sure you answer the actual question that's there. But what often happens as they make it kind of work, they think that's working code, that's good enough. I think I've solved it. And then they spend time on something that wasn't asked for. So often in these things, there's no need for a UI, like a user interface. It's just, if I have this input, did this output come in? So if I have these comments, did these stats come out at the other end? And people go, oh, I'm going to write this thing that pretty prints the comments and does all of this. And they spend a lot of time doing this other thing, which is actually not answering the question. So I think jumping into the code and understanding the question is probably a good thing. The next thing to do is come back to the problem statement and read through it and highlight everything that's a noun, everything that's like, so in this case, we have a comment stream. Each comment is made up of a user, a time, and the comment text. Your program needs to spit out the average of comments per minute and the average of this. And those nouns will guide you in potential. If you're doing this as an object-oriented, and I presume most people are, this will guide you into the objects that you may want to have, or at least may want to address, to say, right, I need a comment stream. Okay, I need a comment, which would be its own object, and something could understand that a comment has those parts in it. Maybe a date stamp doesn't need to be an object, but the comment does. Then my processor needs to take a group of these comments, and if in my problem statement I say it's a processor, then you should call it a processor. If in my thing, if I call it an aggregator, then you should probably say, okay, I'm going to call this thing an aggregator. And then when it spits things out, I may say my comments per minute or whatever it is. Again, use the words they use in presenting that problem to try and work out what the classes you want are, and also what the messages between them are. So obviously, if we were doing an e-commerce example, you may say, there are these particular items that are being bought and being put into a cart, and the cart is being checked out. So use that language within your code, because it will be easier for you to follow. And most likely, it's the way that those people stick to it. Another point, as you've thrown in here, is adhere to a coding style. So often people will write in their favorite code or whatever it is, but they will miss just little bits of detail. And by little, sometimes I mean they're really little. They may call their, and in Ruby, which is a language I use, you tend to call your file names tend to be file name underscore file name underscore like parts of the file name with underscores .rb. If you don't use that standard, the person who's assessing you may not immediately know that there's something wrong with it, but in general they go, this just doesn't look like Ruby. Right? A typical file would have a readme.md. If you don't have that as all capital readme.md in a Ruby project, to me, consciously, I'm thinking, has this person never looked at any Ruby projects? Because every Ruby project I see has that coding standard. And these are just little things, but obviously then you have linting tools. So in something like Ruby, you have Rubocop, which does basically a lot of stylistic linting. In things like in JavaScript, you have ESLint, which will do the equivalent. There's another project called Prettier, which will prettify all of your code to a certain standard. And again, it just means if you use that default standard for that language, or at least one that's prescribed by some part of the internet, your code's going to be easier for other people to read. And often it will pick up a lot of really minor things that you may have even gone, oh, that method's not used here, or this variable is called but never used. So those tools will also help you with that. And those tools exist for all the languages out there. I mean, languages like Go, like the linting tool is actually built in. You can't write a Go program that doesn't look like a Go program. But certainly in Ruby and JavaScript, you can make a real mess. So answer the question, use the problem statement to dictate what the parts of your code need to be and probably need to be called. And then obviously try and keep within linting, within the forms of that language with adhering to a coding style.
Michael, I feel like, we're already like half an hour in and we only scratched the surface of the topic. We have like more and more comments coming in. Let's just try, give like a brief answers to majority of the questions. So we try to give attention to majority of our audience. Because otherwise it will, I feel like we need another 5 sessions to go through all of this. But basically, here's like a quick question, such as Naresh is asking, can you please suggest some ideas or learning portals to crack a coding challenge?
So there's hundreds. My favorite actually is maybe not a crack the thing. It's and now I'll forget its name. That's great. There's lots of them. There are things like LeetCode is probably kind of one of the most known ones, especially for hard problems. And as I said, my mind always misses out on my memory is shot. I can't remember the one that's my favorite. The thing about these things, so there's a lot of little coding challenges you can do. Leet Code's one of them. Advent of Code is this thing in December where they give you a different problem every day, and you try and solve a problem a day for the 25 days leading up to Christmas. That's an Advent calendar, and you can look at all the historical ones. These are also kind of interesting. But as I said, there's a lot of these portals. The one that I like, and I will find the name for it in a second when I take a breath.
We can put it in the comments.
Yeah, and the reason I like it is because it has inbuilt mentoring. So when you solve it and you think like, this is great, you get a mentor come back and say, hey, have you thought of doing it this way? What about this? And I've used this for learning languages that I'm not that confident with. So I'm learning Rust at the moment, which is a low-level systems language. And I love it because I can solve a challenge and I spend 100 lines doing it. And somebody comes back within 24 hours and gives me a comment. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? And it's kind of built in to automatically kind of help me with that. So there is a lot of them, but, and I say the but, none of these platforms teach you how to write good code. They don't teach you how to write tests. They don't teach you how to solve a problem. And I actually feel there's probably room for another platform. Oh, there we go. Thank you, David. Exorcism is the one I'm talking about. So Exorcism is in various languages, and my wife has just written for me as well, Exorcism. So see, clearly everybody knows better than I do. But Exorcism is the one that has the mentors built in, and it kind of gives you like a schedule of doing these things. You know, you can only do certain things once you've opened up, once you've passed a certain level. So I highly recommend that with a mentor. But as I said, I do worry that all of these things don't get you to solve real world problems, which most coding challenges unfortunately are not. And also they don't teach you how to write tests and how to test your code, because usually they've got built-in tests to say, make these tests pass. For that, I think you probably, well, I'm hoping at some stage to maybe come up with my own tutorial, which at the end, I think you can follow me as Ceramic on Twitter or GitHub as Ceramic, SARAMIC, and my website is failure-driven.com, failure-driven. Because I believe every failure will convince you to work harder and keep going. So at some point, I hope to put out my own series of things there. But just to kind of keep it brief, the last thing is do problems with a friend, right? So one is practice, but do problems with a friend. It's great to go online and try and solve one of these things by yourself. Ultimately, the coding challenges, especially the in-person ones, you're going to have to do in real life. So get a friend. They don't even have to necessarily be a programmer, just somebody to ask you, what are you doing now? How's this working, etc. Let's shoot through some more questions.
Yeah, and I think that's a similar kind of similar direction with this question from David. What do you think about getting help for taking home tests?
I think it's great. I think the reality is, as developers, we spend most of our time on Stack Overflow. So we're already asking questions. We're already looking up using Google. Certainly, I suppose the problem here is if you are looking to get a job somewhere and you're saying, okay, I need to solve this coding challenge, and you go, hey, Michael, can you help me? And I'll go, oh, what's this for? And you'll say, oh, it's just a problem I'm trying to solve. And if I kind of lead you through that and solve it for you, I mean, no one wins. You don't win because you theoretically get this job, assuming my challenge solution is good enough. The company doesn't win. So there still needs to be this other step somewhere in between. And usually what people do is to say, well, the code that you've got when you've come for an interview, can you change it? Can you modify it? Do you understand it? But in general, I say yes to getting help. I know there are various books on cracking the code challenges. One of them. There's other books about how to solve these things. So asking somebody is just a step further than doing that. So certainly reach out. We've got a great community in IT in general. With things like open source, people are very open to doing that. They may not have the best interpersonal skills to allow you to succeed always, but in general, I think it's a great thing to get some help.
Here you go. Chris is asking, coming back to, the time that we spend on the coding challenge. Do you think coding challenge should be paid if you take over 4 hours?
Yes, they should be. And you should own the copyright on them, right? Because you go in and people say, oh, can you do this challenge? And please don't post it on the internet because we want to keep using it. And you're kind of going, so you're giving me a brief. I'm spending 4 or 8 or 12 or a whole weekend solving it. And I don't even own the copyright of this because oh dear, you guys are going to be in this problem where you don't have to do it. Look, I do like that idea. I have heard of one company. I won't know who they are, but in the US, I think they would just say, come and work with us for a week. And you just literally sit with them for a week. You'd sign a contract, they'd pay you for the week. And at the end of the week, they'd say, you're a great person. I'd love to work with you. Or obviously things didn't work out, and that's fine. But that's a big ask on both the person. Well, one, you'll have to tell your current employer that you're looking for a job, which not everyone may be in a position to do. 2, you will then have to, I suppose for you, it's a win-win, assuming you can get that time off work and make it, be comfortable with that, either because you're open about searching for a job or not. But I think often it may just be that the difficulty may be in things like legal and other things to say, well, I suppose they could give you a voucher or cash in hand for saying, look, you spent 5 hours doing this. But I suppose then most people will say, don't spend more than 2 hours doing this challenge. So I don't know. As I said, in general, if I was in a company and we had a coding challenge, I would be pressing management to say, let's make this coding challenge interesting enough so we can just open source it so that people can see what the coding challenge is, and they can just come and say, hey, this is how I solved it. And then extend it in place where it's their code, and you can go, right, how would you extend it to do this or this? And 2, I would also say it would be fair to pay, but it kind of depends on people pushing management to do that. But yes, I think it would be fair to be paying people for that much effort.
I think Nurbeck have like a comment, in relation to this. You can do one code challenge and put it on your public GitHub, and next time someone asks for the code challenge, you can give them that link if the tech stack is matching, of course. So I guess it's coming back to this, challenges that can be public, and you can just maybe, try to reuse it.
Yeah, look, I do like the idea, and from one perspective, and there's another perspective that I don't. You could almost have this passport, and I know one of the challenge sites now that comes to my mind is HackerRank, right? Where and Top Coder is another one where they have timed competitions, and theoretically you could just say, look, this is my HackerRank, this is my Top Coder rank. Am I good enough for coding? So it's kind of interesting because I do like this idea of a passport to say, here is 5 coding challenges that I've done. Maybe I've done them under test conditions, whatever those happen to be, and they're verifiable. Together with my vaccination certificate. Here's my coding certificate. Go and have a look at that. I think the problem is people want to. The companies interviewing often want to have their own take on it. And they'll go, well, you've got this tech stack, but we actually want to see how you write tests. Or we actually want you to do this particular thing and then extend it in a particular way to capture your thinking around how you deal with maybe some algorithmic thing. And if those problems aren't there, it may not work. The other thing is, I suppose it depends on whose market is it. So if it's the employer's market, then they're going to go, I'm not going to go and look at somebody's GitHub and try and understand which problems I should look at, etc. I'm just going to send this challenge out. If it's the employee's market, which it's a little bit more right now, you could look at my GitHub, and I do a lot of side projects. So you look at my GitHub and there's actually a lot of code written there. If you ask me though, can you show me some code on your GitHub, Michael, that's good? I would say there's a lot of average code there. I'd never point somebody to do that. And I have seen that once happen where somebody kind of almost arrogantly said, I don't want to do this coding challenge for the company I was at and we were recruiting. They said, I don't want to do this coding challenge. Look at my GitHub. So we went and looked at their GitHub, and they were an open source contributor. And we said, great, you're part of this open source. Let's look at your last 5 commits. And their last 5 commits was revert the previous commit, which was a revert of a revert, which was a revert. So basically their last 5 commits was undo the work that they had just done or somebody else had done. And there was a couple of snarky comments in there. And I thought, you know what? We had a look at your GitHub. It didn't look really good. If you bring that attitude to our company, we don't want it. And we've got people actively trying to get jobs by doing our code challenge. We'd rather take somebody that does that. So it can backfire a little bit.
Yeah, and I guess it's again, we coming back to this, the purpose of this challenge and what sort of what sort of skill set they're looking for and what they're actually trying to see by bringing this challenge. Rushab's question: it's funny how a company tests junior developers for 3 technologies in 60 minutes and disqualify because candidate couldn't nail it. How would you respond to such company?
I mean, I would say, so this is an interesting topic. If the company is actually needing that, and there are, like, the most known companies of this is what is known as the FANG Company. So Facebook, Apple, Airbnb, Netflix, Google. And they just know so many people want to work for them that they've lifted the level to say, you need to know data structures and algorithms inside and out. You need to live and breathe them. We're going to give you something that would be really, really difficult to do, and you're just going to regurgitate it, but not, because you're actually going to know it so well that you will be able to solve these 3 or 4 problems in 35 minutes. Now, there was recently an actually good article, well, a good overview of how somebody achieved that. They kind of went through and they said, look, I wasn't a brilliant developer, but then they spent 3 years practicing leak code problems, doing all of these challenges, practicing for challenges for 3 years in their weekends, in their afternoons, to get to a level where they could then go and sit one of these kind of exams and pass and get a job at Microsoft. And it's kind of interesting if you want to work at that company, and this person's dream was, I wanted to work at a FANG company. That's what you've got to put into it. Do you want to work at a FANG company? That's the other question. Do you want to put that work in? Do you have more to give overall in community, in family, in your friends, in your coding community, by not being somebody who spends all their time learning data structures and algorithms? Maybe. Do those companies do everything perfectly? Certainly not. So I've been in a couple of companies that were very much driven around A/B testing, about product quality of product delivery, about quality of testing. And those things, you're not going to nail that kind of a, this coding interview. In fact, recently I was doing, part of the research of this, I was actually doing a number of coding challenges, and it was interesting. One group came up with their own coding challenge. They were kind of a new young company. They hadn't had a coding challenge. They put something in front of me, and they kind of expected me to pick it up and run with it within an hour and a half, solve something. And I could solve it, but fundamentally they hadn't tested this idea with a number of people. And I saw a number of holes in the whole idea of what they were doing. So I said, well, this is really weird, because I would never build a password form in this particular way, or I'd never approach doing this in this particular way, or you've given me all this code, but you haven't written any tests, and you've asked me to do this thing, and I'd really write tests, but you've also given me an hour and a half, in which case I don't really have enough time to build quality software. At which stage I kind of go, well, do I want to? I mean, I know that was their coding challenge, and they welcomed some feedback, because obviously they hadn't run it with many people. But do I want to work in a company like that? Do I want to work in a company where I can't have that discussion, where I can't respond to a company saying, why do you want me to solve a reverse, a parse a binary tree or something, or do a sort, like, why? What's the customer need? And I suppose what you can do is maybe stop applying for jobs for companies that just want algorithmic brilliance in an hour, and start finding your niche. And if your niche is to say, right, I actually want to build quality software that makes a difference. For me, I really don't like advertising. It works, but I don't like it. I would hate to work for an advertising company, and I have in the past. I'd rather work for a company that's actually got a real service or a real product. So for me, I'd be kind of like, oh, I don't want to work for those kind of companies. I want to work for something I can get behind. I want to work for something that I can have a discussion and understand why we're doing that problem. And I will often start any coding challenge with like, are we serious? Is this your business? Do we really want to do this? And I'm sure a number of times I haven't got accepted. It's because maybe that attitude. But that's where I kind of go, well, if I'm serious about writing good quality software and a good product, then maybe I'm not that interested in those kind of jobs. If you are, that's fine. Practice. But if you're not, then you can also just say, right, are your developers, and I'll tell you, every company's got developers writing a lot of code that gets thrown out or never used. So just because I can write these 3 technologies in 60 minutes, does that mean I'm delivering value to the customer? And if that company says, oh, this is great, this is the kind of person we need on the team, then fantastic, right? So be open to say that, because maybe that's exactly who they need. Maybe they just have these people who can solve 3 technologies in 60 minutes but cannot deliver quality. So if you've got that foresight, if you've got maybe knowledge in a particular industry, so if you know more about finance, then you can say, look, I may not solve these tests really quickly, but I understand finance, or I understand the learning sector, or I understand the e-commerce sector, maybe because you've had other experiences. So certainly be truthful to yourself, and I applaud you if you are really into data structures and algorithms and want to kind of nail those kind of difficult problems. But if you want to do the really difficult problems, the ones of actually delivering quality software to customers, then make yourself streamline yourself that way. Apply for companies that are more like that, and be willing to take a no from a company that says you couldn't solve these 3 problems in 60 minutes. You go, okay, that's fine. That didn't seem like very important problems.
And I think, Michael, like with the really great tips there, and I think the really simple tip that people sometimes just simply forget, it's ask questions. Yeah, so you can ask questions. If it's with your example, it's clearly the case. Like if you think that it doesn't look right, or maybe it's not applicable, companies would love that you ask more questions, and especially if they're relevant. And I guess Sarah have a question that in the same direction. When is the time to admit you cannot do part of the challenge? Are companies testing for honesty of capability, or want you to fake it till you make it attitude?
This is a great question. I think the biggest inspiration on this one is from my father, who also was in IT. And he went for a job interview late in his career. He's now in his, is his 80? Yeah, I think he's turned 80. But late in his career, he was changing jobs, and he was an Oracle database kind of person. And he went for an interview at the age of like 65 or something like that. And they said, okay, Mr. Milewski, tell us what you know about a particular feature in Postgres, in Oracle. And he said, I have to warn you, I only know Oracle up to 9.6. And at one stage, I asked him a feature, and he looked at them and said, I'm pretty sure that's not a feature in 9.6. And as I said, I only know to that level. That's what you're hiring for. I can't tell you the answer. And they like scratching their head, and they look through the manual and go, oh, you're right. You're right. That is not a feature that was there. It's in the next version. So being truthful is always a good thing. The other thing is, and especially people who are coming through as juniors, solving the problem isn't always the most important part. And I know at one place I worked, what they were looking for was to find the gaps. They weren't looking for you to solve the problem, especially if you were a junior, because it was a relatively hard problem. They're looking for you to say, what are the gaps? What do we have to teach this person? And this company was very strict on the way they did testing. So they, in fact, didn't care how you did testing, because no matter what you did, they would have a different opinion. It was more important that you would be able to adapt to their opinion of testing. Their key for a junior was, do you understand the concept of object orientation, and can you split things out into objects? And that basically meant that as soon as they had an answer that was just one block of code, they would throw it out, because it's like, I mean, they give you some feedback, but they basically say, look, if you can't get the concept that and the problem clearly describe the various nouns, you could easily get like 4, maybe 6 different entities. If you could not get that to break that out, then they just considered it's too big a step to take you on board to teach you that. Go and learn that. Go and spend 6 months in another company, learn that. When you come back, we'll take you on board and teach you all the other things, but that's the one thing we won't teach you. So I think the thing is that company won't tell you that, or most people won't tell you what their rubric is on how they judge you. So I think the best thing to be is honest to yourself, do the best job you can, spend 4 hours if that's what is required, submit what you got in 4 hours, and you may be surprised. You may be surprised because people go, oh, why did you solve so little of it? And you say, well, because you said to spend 4 hours. This was quality code. You said it has to be production level. And I clearly documented that I couldn't make this particular thing work. I couldn't make this work, but I could do these things. Because at the end of the day, there's no point hiding it, right? And it's kind of this weird thing, like there was a question before about prove these 3 technologies in 60 minutes. Everybody says, right, are you an expert at HTML, CSS, JavaScript, 3 languages, object-oriented, etc.? You're not an expert at all of these things. There's no way. You can only pick 1 or 2 things that you can be actually reasonably good at, maybe an expert. And sure, it's good to have a breadth of knowledge. But yeah, I think you have to be, and again, it's hard, right? Because I'm coming from obviously a background quite privileged that my father was a programmer. I'm a programmer. I went through the traditional university kind of background, but I've worked with a lot of people who haven't, right? I've worked through a lot of people who have never done a uni degree or have never done one relevant to IT. I've worked with a lot of people, especially helping them that have done a boot camp and are looking for that first job. And I've found great pleasure in working out what they do and don't know. But I've certainly, these people as they're coming through, it's going to be very difficult for you because you'll say, right, I didn't solve the challenge. I didn't get this job. I didn't solve the challenge. I didn't get this job. And I've kind of talked to some of them and I've said, right, show me the code you submitted. And I said, right, here's the problem. 1, you spend all of your time on a particular part that was not part of the problem. Because I read through it and I said, look, did they ever ask you for writing a terminal interactive app? And they said, no. And I said, half your code is the interactive app. Why did you spend your time on it? 2, they didn't break it down into readable code. They were super happy that it worked. And I said, well, it has to be production quality. Maybe if it didn't work, but it read better, or you had kind of understood the concepts better, then maybe you would have got a better thing. So yeah, I think stick to what you know, be truthful, practice, but try and also kind of answer the question as best you can. But there's no point faking that out.
Michael, so many great tips there. Like, look, it feels like, I feel like you can talk about it for like 5 hours at least. So, but I guess we're trying not to get over 1 hour today. Look, there's a lot of questions there. I think we answered most of them. There's one more question from Naresh. You already kind of touch on about it, but maybe it will be a good question to summarize everything as well. So Naresh is asking, most of the coding challenges focus on output validation rather than approach. What should be focused or given priority?
Right, hang on, let me just pause that in my mind. Most of the coding challenges focus on output validation rather than the approach. What should be focused or given priority? Well, it depends a little bit. I think we probably want to focus more on the approach, on the questions you ask, on the diagrams you draw as you're trying to work that out, if it's an in-person thing, right? If you've got the opportunity to do that, on naming your variables, on breaking things out into methods, on breaking out into objects, or if you're doing functional programming to make kind of, functions that are reusable and composable and things like that. I certainly think that we will be better off as a software industry if you focus on that. If, on the other hand, you've got other companies that kind of really want you to focus on that validation, then, well, tough luck. but I don't think they want you to, right? I don't think they want you to. And I think there's probably a famous saying, I don't know what it is, but if you want to do something quickly, you have to do it slowly first, and only then can you do it quickly. Whereas if you rush into it, you'll never know how to do it slowly, whether that's playing music, doing some physical activity, or coding. So I think the same goes for coding. If you're not going to name your variable, think of the problem, understand the concept, name your variable well, name your method well, write the right tests that would drive that functionality out in the first place, then you're never going to be able to just quickly validate something with the output. So certainly I think one, code at the end of the day ends up being readable, more about reading than writing. And I can write a lot of code that validates the output that people would be horrendous to try and read what I've written. And that's why I love things like pair programming, where somebody can be with me the whole time. And as I'm writing code or they're writing code, we can be vetting each other and giving this feedback of saying, that's great, Michael, I didn't know that works, but I'm not going to read this. You're probably not going to understand this in 6 months' time. So I think we're always better to make sure the approach is sound, the logic is sound. If you've got the right company, they'll see through that and go, right, this is the person that we want to solve these problems. And if you practice that, it will become faster as well.
Michael, that was great. We up to 55 minutes. We went through majority of the questions. So much value in all your tips, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this session. So make sure, if you get the value from today, make sure to like this video and share it with the people who need to hear this. So obviously it encourages us to keep going as well and share the knowledge. So please make sure to like and share this video with those who need to hear this. And obviously, look, I'm kind of trying to wrap it up before we hit the 1 hour mark. Michael, I actually, so there's the people saying thank you, Chris saying great answer, Rushab, excellent take, thanks for response, Naresh, great, thanks everyone. Obviously, really happy with your input. Michael, before I let you go, I actually wanna challenge you, and there is a little giveaway that we can give to one of our participants, and we have a lot of great questions there. So I will give you a tough challenge to pick the winner who's gonna get a one-on-one virtual coffee chat with you after the session. So think about it for a minute. Think about who asked the best question. Have a think. And while you're thinking about it, just want to let you know, guys, that next week we have a panel discussion. So the panel discussion, so usually I have one guest. Next week I have 3 guests. And we're going to talk about delivery managers versus delivery leads. Is it the same or is it a difference? So we're going to talk about it with Jason, Raz, and Kathik. So make sure if the delivery is something that you might be interested in. Also agile delivery, obviously, make sure to tune in next week, next Wednesday, 20th of October at 5:30 p.m. So there'll be great discussion there. Kathleen saying great tips, thank you. So Michael, who's the winner? So who you think was the best question today?
Well, let me just say thank you, Jana, for having me. Thank you all for having so many great comments and questions. And I think the winner is going to be Ashraf Unisa Begum, who said, I'm a software developer currently looking for full-time work. I think that's great, because I think junior software developers probably have the most to learn from people who've been around a little bit longer, like myself. I think there's some definite kind of, looking for full-time work. Maybe it's her first job that she's actually looking for. She finds them challenging. I feel that, to me, that's probably the person I can give the most to, and who probably challenge me the most, because certainly, hopefully, a lot of the tips I've given for others can kind of take them on that journey of wherever they are, and whether they need to upskill, practice with other people. etc. But I think certainly that question there rings true to me, and I'd love to have a coffee chat with Ashraf. Maybe even we could do a pair programming session. I'm sure we can work something out, assuming the time zones are good. But if she's here right now, I'm sure we can work something out. So congratulations, Ashraf.
Obviously we're friends on LinkedIn, so make sure everyone, obviously don't be shy. Like if you have any questions to Michael after this show, I guess the easiest way would be find Michael on LinkedIn. So you can just find Michael Milewski on LinkedIn. If you connected with me, you will find him tagged in the post. And also let's just remind Michael, your website and the best ways to connect with you as well.
Yeah, so failuredriven.com. Hopefully there'll be more content coming on there soon. No doubt a link to this video. And on GitHub, I'm Ceramic. On Twitter, I'm Ceramic. But sure, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn to become friends and message me. Any questions, any other things, feel free. And if you do look at my GitHub, it is relatively active. And if you search in the right spots, you may see previous attempts of my own of doing various challenges and the like. So, yeah, I'm a pretty open person, pretty easy to get in contact with. Ashraf, thank you. I'm looking forward to the challenge. But yeah, thank you all. It's been a great evening talking.
Thank you, Ashraf. What's a nice surprise. So everyone else, thank you so much for participating with great questions. If you feel like we haven't answered some of the questions, again, feel free to reach out to me and to Michael, and we'll try to obviously to cover it all. Again, Michael, thank you so much. That's been like such a valuable discussion today. So many great tips. I'll put you on the spot again, Michael, to finish it up. I just not gonna let you go just like this. Can you please share with us your favorite inspirational quote to finish this discussion today?
Oh,
don't look at your wife.
No, I'm looking.
Waiting for your wife to give you this.
Yeah, what did she? Look, I think my favorite quote, and I think this is actually some kind of Indian proverb, if I remember correctly. It doesn't matter how far down the wrong path you have gone, you have to turn back and go down the right path. So yeah, I do see a lot of software projects, a lot of approaches, and people have gone down the wrong path and then think, I'll get through at the end. And it's like, no, it doesn't matter how long you've gone down the wrong path. You got to turn back and go down the right path. So that's something that I always kind of, it's good to remember. That maybe we're sometimes on the wrong path and we'll have to step back, take that perspective.
100%, trying to choose this right path from the beginning. And I think it's really related to all those tips that you gave about challenges as well, kind of, like understanding the question, understanding what you're trying to answer, rather than just like trying to write the code and get drifted away somewhere else. I think it's definitely related.
Absolutely.
Definitely related to this quote. Michael, thank you so much. We, already past 6:30, so it's a dinner time in Melbourne. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And I will see you next Wednesday, 20th of November at 5:40 p.m. for the panel discussion. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.